Ave Imperator, I speak to you from the edge of time itself. Beneath the imperial palace, in a vault sealed since the emperor first sat upon the golden throne, I discovered a message, written in his own hand, dated 10,000 years ago. It read, "To whoever finds this, by the time you read these words, I will be waking. The galaxy has 3 days to prepare. It will not be enough." The seal was broken yesterday. The message is now active. The Emperor awakens in 72 hours. And nothing will ever be the same. Ave Imperator. I am Historiator Terminus Gaius Severin, keeper of the vault of ultimate contingencies, custodian of knowledge so dangerous that my very existence is classified. There are perhaps 12 individuals in the entire Imperium who know I exist. By speaking these words, I condemn myself to execution. But the truth must be preserved. The Vault of Ultimate Contingencies exists 3 kilometers beneath the deepest level of the Imperial Palace. To reach it, you must pass through 17 security checkpoints, each requiring biometric authentication from officials who do not know what they are protecting. The vault itself is shielded by technology that predates the Imperium, psi shields, temporal locks, reality anchors that prevent the contents from being observed by any means, psychic or otherwise. I inherited this position from my predecessor, who inherited it from his, in an unbroken chain stretching back to the days immediately after the Emperor's internment. We are forbidden to speak of what we guard. We are forbidden to record its contents. We exist only to watch, to wait, and to act when certain conditions are met. Yesterday at 23:47 Imperial Standard Time, those conditions were met. A sealed container, one I had maintained for 40 years without knowing its purpose, spontaneously opened. Inside was a single data slate, pristine despite its age, bearing the Emperor's personal seal. When I activated it, the message played in his voice. Not a recording, his actual voice, preserved in psychic resonance that made the air shimmer and my bones ache. To the keeper of this vault, if you are hearing this message, then my transformation is nearly complete. You have 72 hours until I awaken fully. The galaxy must prepare. Release Protocol Omega immediately. May humanity forgive you for the chaos this will cause, but there is no other way. Protocol Omega. I had heard whispers of it, fragmentary references in documents so heavily redacted they were more void than text, but I never believed it actually existed. Now, holding the activation codes in my trembling hands, I understood why my predecessors had aged so rapidly, why they all died looking haunted. Protocol Omega is the complete revelation of truth. Every lie, every secret, every hidden horror that the Imperium has buried for 10 millennia, all of it released simultaneously to prepare humanity for what is coming. I activated it. Emperor, forgive me, I activated it. The truth, FLOODS out. Within 6 hours of Protocol Omega's activation, every hidden archive in the Imperium simultaneously unsealed. Tech priests monitoring information networks reported data floods of unprecedented scale. Trillions of documents, pic captures, audio recordings, psychic imprints, 10,000 years of suppressed truth pouring into public consciousness like a tsunami. The Inquisition tried to suppress it. They failed. The information was designed by the Emperor himself to be unsuppressible, encoded with psychic imperatives that forced anyone who tried to delete it to instead spread it further. What was revealed in those first hours? The imperial truth exposed, the Emperor's original vision, a secular paradise built on reason and science, explicitly rejecting all religion and worship, was broadcast to every world simultaneously. Billions of faithful citizens learned that the God they worshipped had explicitly commanded never to be worshipped. The lost Primarchs unveiled. The truth about the 2nd and 11th Legions, erased from history, was finally revealed. They had not fallen to chaos. They had refused to participate in the Emperor's genocidal campaigns against non-compliant human civilizations. The Emperor had personally executed his own sons for choosing mercy over conquest. Their legions were mind-wiped and absorbed into the Ultramarines. The Webway catastrophe, full details of the Emperor's secret project emerged. How close humanity came to achieving godlike mastery of the galaxy. How Magnus's well-intentioned warning about Horus's betrayal destroyed 10,000 years of work in an instant. How the Emperor has been fighting an endless war in the webway tunnels beneath Terra, holding back infinite demon hordes while simultaneously maintaining the Astronomicon. The Mechanicus lie, the revelation that the Omnissiah and the Emperor are the same being, that the entire cult Mechanicus is built on a misunderstanding the Emperor deliberately cultivated, that the machine god they worship imprisoned beneath Mars is actually a Cetan shard, a fragment of a broken star god that the Emperor has been secretly interrogating for technological knowledge. The Astartes' secret, the true extent of genetic modification in space marines was revealed, how much of their humanity is stripped away, how many fail the transformation and are quietly euthanized, how the process was designed to create loyal soldiers, not heroes, weapons, not saviors. The psychological impact was catastrophic. Across the Imperium, civilization ground to a halt as billions processed revelations that shattered their entire worldview. Riots erupted on 17,000 worlds. The ecclesiarchy descended into theological civil war within hours. 3 entire cardinal worlds declared the Emperor a heretic and attempted to secede. But Protocol Omega contained one more element, a message broadcast psychically to every human simultaneously. Do not despair, these truths were hidden to protect you when you were weak, but you are weak no longer. In 72 hours I wake, and when I wake, the age of lies ends, the age of truth begins. Prepare yourselves, your God, your Father, your Protector returns. The High Lords Emergency Conclave. On Terra, in the Senatorum Imperialis, the High Lords of Terra convened in emergency session. For the first time in Imperial history, every High Lord was physically present, no proxies, no hololithic attendance. The situation was too grave for anything less than full commitment. I obtained transcripts of that meeting. They are illuminating. Lord Commander Militant of the Imperial Guard, this is disaster. 17,000 worlds in open revolt. The ecclesiarchy has fractured into at least 40 different sects, several of which are already at war with each other. The Adeptus Mechanicus is in chaos. Half their forges have shut down, while tech priests debate whether they've been worshipping a lie. We're looking at the complete collapse of imperial authority within weeks. Master of the Administratum, the economic impact alone is catastrophic. Supply chains across 3 entire segmentums have broken down. Without the ecclesiarchy providing social cohesion, entire hive worlds are descending into anarchy. And this is before the Emperor actually wakes, if his awakening causes even more disruption. Inquisitorial representative, we should have suppressed Protocol Omega the moment it activated. I argued for destroying the vault of ultimate contingencies decades ago. This is why we maintain secrets, not to oppress, but to protect people from truths they cannot handle. It was Grand Master Voldus of the Grey Knights who silenced the debate. His testimony is preserved in the official record. Enough, all of you speak as if this is a catastrophe we must manage. You are wrong. This is not a disaster, this is preparation. The Emperor designed Protocol Omega specifically for this moment. He knew these truths would cause chaos. He released them anyway, because whatever is coming, whatever he becomes when he wakes, requires humanity to be ready for absolute truth, not comfortable lies. The question is not how we suppress the chaos. The question is, how do we guide humanity through it? Because in 72 hours, ready or not, everything changes. Lord Commander Gilliman, attending via secure Voxlink from his flagship in the Ultima Segmentum, spoke the words that ended the debate. My father is waking. After 10,000 years of waiting, he returns, and he chose to begin his return by destroying every comfortable lie we have told ourselves. He is forcing us to confront the truth of what we are, what we have become, and what we must be. This is a test, not of our loyalty that is assumed, but of our worthiness. Can we handle truth? Can we build a civilization on reality rather than myth? Can we be the children he hoped we would become rather than the fearful masses we have been? In 72 hours, we will have our answer. Until then, we do not suppress. We do not retreat into comfortable delusions. We face the truth and we prepare. The Emperor protects, but perhaps the real question is, are we worth protecting? The Golden Throne's transformation. While the Imperium descended into controlled chaos, beneath the Imperial Palace, the Emperor's transformation accelerated. I obtained reports from Adeptus Custodes monitoring the throne room. Their observations describe phenomena that defy rational explanation. Hour 024, the Golden Throne begins dismantling itself, not breaking down, deliberately reconfiguring. Machinery that has remained static for 10 millennia flows, like liquid metal, rearranging into new configurations. The tech priests monitoring it report that the throne is rewriting its own design in real time, optimizing itself for purposes they cannot comprehend. Hour 24:48, the Emperor's physical form undergoes visible transformation. His wounds, injuries inflicted by Horus 10,000 years ago that have never healed, begin to close. Not healing, but reversing. Tissue regenerates backwards through time, bones unknit and reform stronger, organs that were destroyed regrow from nothing. It is as if the Emperor's body is being restored to a moment before he was wounded. But there is more. He grows, not slowly, but measurably with each passing hour. His already massive frame expands, bones lengthening, muscles developing in patterns that do not match baseline human anatomy. By hour 48, he has increased in mass by approximately 30%. Hour 48:72, the light begins. The Emperor's skin starts to emit illumination, soft at first, barely noticeable, but it intensifies with each passing hour. By hour 60, the custodians report they must shield their eyes. By hour 70, the light is so intense that augmented optics fail to filter it adequately. And within that light, they see movement. The Emperor's eyes remain closed, but beneath the lids, rapid motion suggests dreaming. Or perhaps not dreaming, perhaps consciousness operating on levels so far beyond mortal awareness that even sleep becomes a form of transcendent thought. Most disturbing of all, he speaks, not aloud but psychically, fragmentary words that echo in the minds of everyone within the palace. Almost ready. They must understand. Forgive me for what I must do. The burden of godhood. I never wanted this. Captain General Trajan Valoris, standing vigil at the throne room entrance, recorded his observations in a private log I should never have accessed. I have served the Emperor for 3 centuries. I have stood watch over his broken form, maintained my vigil without wavering, never doubting that he would return. But now, watching his transformation, I am afraid. Not afraid he will die, not afraid he will fail, afraid he will succeed. Because the being taking shape within that chrysalis of light and machinery is not the man who entered the throne 10,000 years ago. It is something new, something vast, something that makes even a custodian, genetically engineered to know no fear, question whether humanity is ready for what is about to emerge. We have prayed for his return. We may come to regret those prayers. The warp reacts. But the most dramatic changes occurred not in the materium, but in the warp itself. Across the galaxy, every astropath, every navigator, every psyker of sufficient power to perceive the immaterium reported the same phenomenon. The warp was changing. For 10,000 years, chaos has dominated the immaterium. The 4 gods have reigned supreme, their domains vast and terrible. The Emperor's presence has been a constant point of resistance, the Astronomicon, a golden star in infinite darkness, holding back the tide, but always defensive, always reactive, never advancing. Until now. Navigator Primary Alessandra Novaris, one of the most powerful navigators in the Navis Nobilite, submitted a report that was immediately classified and sealed. I found it in the data flood of Protocol Omega. 70 hours before the projected awakening time, the Astronomicon changed, not in intensity, though it has been growing brighter, but in nature. For 10 millennia, the Emperor's light has been static. A beacon, yes, but passive. It illuminates but does not act. Ships navigate by it, but it does not navigate them. It simply exists. No longer. The light is now Aware, it moves, it seeks. I watched as it reached out across the warp, extending tendrils of golden radiance into regions that have been dark for centuries. Where those tendrils touch, chaos recoils, demons flee, warp storms calm. But more than that, the light is preparing. I do not know how I know this, but I am certain the Astronomicon is not just growing stronger. It is positioning itself, like a warrior taking stance before battle, like a siege engine being aimed at enemy walls. The Emperor is not merely waking, he is preparing to attack, and when he fully awakens, when that light reaches its full power, the Chaos Gods should be afraid. For the first time in eternity, they should be very afraid. Indeed, reports from across the Imperium confirmed Novaris's observation. Warp storms that had raged for millennia suddenly dissipated. Demon worlds found their connection to the Imperium disrupted. Chaos cultists across the galaxy reported the same nightmare simultaneously. A golden giant, growing larger with each passing hour, striding through the warp toward the domains of the ruinous powers. The Chaos Gods responded with unprecedented force. The Great Rift surged with violent energy. Demon armies launched desperate attacks across the Imperium, as if trying to strike before the Emperor could fully manifest. But they were too late. They had always been too late. Fellow servants of the throne, I must now describe the moment itself, the instant when 72 hours expired and the Emperor's transformation completed. I was not in the throne room. No mortal save the custodians was permitted that close. But I had access to every sensor feed, every data stream, every psychic monitoring device in the Imperial Palace. What I witnessed, even through electronic intermediaries, has marked my soul forever. At precisely 00:00:00 Imperial Standard Time, the Golden Throne ceased to exist. Not exploded, not malfunction, simply ceased. Every atom of the vast machinery that had sustained the Emperor for 10,000 years converted simultaneously into pure energy, energy that was immediately absorbed into the Emperor's form. The psychic shockwave was catastrophic. Every human being in the Sol system felt it, a pulse of raw power that bypassed physical senses entirely and struck directly at the soul. For exactly 9 seconds, every person in the system experienced perfect, absolute communion with the Emperor's consciousness. What they experienced varied by individual. A simple factory worker on Mars might have felt overwhelming love and acceptance. A corrupt noble might have experienced crushing shame. A loyal soldier might have known absolute certainty of purpose. But everyone, regardless of station or circumstance, understood one thing: the Emperor was awake, fully, finally, and he remembered everything. In the throne room, the custodians reported that the Emperor stood. Not slowly, not weakly, he simply rose from where he had sat for 10 millennia, his movements fluid and powerful despite the transformation his body had undergone. He was changed. Captain General Valoris's description is the most detailed. He stands approximately 4 meters tall now, taller than before, but not impossibly so. His form is humanoid, recognizable, but perfected beyond mortal standards. Every muscle, every bone, every aspect of his physical being optimized to absolute peak. But it is his presence that defies description. He does not merely occupy space, he defines it. Reality bends around him, not from external force, but from the sheer weight of his will imposing order on existence. And his eyes, Emperor preserve us, his eyes. They are not golden anymore. They are windows into something beyond comprehension. Looking into them is like staring into the birth of stars, the death of galaxies, the fundamental equations that govern reality itself. They see everything, past, present, future, possible and impossible, simultaneously. When those eyes turned toward me, I knew he saw not just Trajan Valoris, Captain General of the Custodian Guard. He saw every choice I had ever made, every doubt I had ever harbored, every hope I had ever cherished. He knew me more completely than I know myself. And in that knowing, there was judgment. The first words, Judgment of the faithful. The Emperor did not speak immediately. He stood in the ruins of the throne room for 17 minutes, his gaze sweeping across the assembled custodians. Each warrior felt that gaze penetrate them utterly. 14 custodians collapsed, not from physical harm, but from the weight of what they experienced when the emperor's full attention fell upon them. They had served faithfully for centuries, never doubting, never wavering. But under the emperor's absolute scrutiny, they discovered imperfections they had not known existed. The emperor spoke, but he did not speak aloud. He had transcended such primitive communication. Instead, his words manifested directly in the minds of every human in the soul system. I am awake. 2 words, simple, declarative, but embedded within them was meaning so vast that billions wept at the implications. He continued, I have spent 10,000 years in communion with every human soul. I have felt your PIYRS. I have WITNESSCD your suffering. I have absorbed your faith, your hope, your despair, your rage. I know what you have become in my absence, and I must tell you, I am disappointed. The soul system held its collective breath. You built a civilization on lies. You created a religion I explicitly forbade. You stagnated where I demand advancement. You embicd ignorance where I championed knowledge. But you also survived, against impossible odds, through HORS that would have broken lesser races. You enduid. You fought. You refused to surrender even when surrender would have been easier. So I am disappointed, but I am also proud. You are not what I wanted you to be, but you are strong enough to become what you must be. The ECCLESIRCHY transformed. The Emperor's next act sent shockwaves across the Imperium. With a thought, a single exertion of will, he reached out to every shrine, every cathedral, every temple dedicated to his worship. Billions of religious structures across the galaxy, and he changed them. The statues of the Emperor as God did not crumble. Instead, they transformed. Across the Imperium, in perfect synchronization, every image of the divine Emperor shifted. His pose changed from lordly and distant to humble and protective. His expression shifted from stern judgment to compassionate concern. And beneath every statue, new words appeared, carved into stone by will alone. I am not your God, I am your Father. Do not worship me, understand me. Cardinals and priests across the galaxy collapsed as 10,000 years of doctrine evaporated. Some died from the psychic shock. Others went mad, unable to reconcile their life's work with this absolute contradiction from the God they served. But many, more than the cynics expected, felt only relief, as if a burden they did not know they carried had been lifted. Ecclesiarch Brasidas XVII, the spiritual leader of the imperial cult, was granted a private audience with the emperor. What transpired remains classified, but Brasidas emerged changed. His official statement, delivered to the entire ecclesiarchy, was brief. I have spoken with the emperor, not the god of our prayers, but the man who became more than a man. He has shown me the error of our ways and the path forward. The imperial cult as we knew it is dissolved. In its place, we will build something new, not a church but a school. We will teach the imperial truth as it was meant to be taught, that humanity's salvation lies in knowledge, reason, and unity, not in blind faith but in understanding. Some will call this heresy. They are wrong. This is the only true faith, faith in humanity's potential, faith that we can become what he always intended. The emperor does not need our worship, he needs our work. The MECHANICUS revelation. Next, the emperor turned his attention to Mars. He appeared there, not physically traveling, but simply manifesting his consciousness across space, in the heart of the Fabricator General's sanctum. The ruling tech priests of Mars assembled in terror and awe. What the emperor revealed to them was carefully calculated to be both devastating and liberating. Your OMNISSIEH and I are one, but I am not your machine god. I am something else, a bridge between flesh and steel, biological and mechanical. The entity you call the machine god, imprisoned beneath your world, is a Cetan shard, a fragment of a broken star god that I have interrogated for millennia. But this does not mean your faith was false. It means it was incomplete. The union of man and machine is sacred, not because a god commands, but because it represents humanity's evolution. You were right to seek perfection through technology. You were wrong to seek it through stagnation. I will show you the truth now. Prepare yourselves. The Emperor descended into the Noctis labyrinth, the forbidden depths beneath Mars where the void dragon sleeps. And there, before the assembled tech priests, he performed a miracle of technology. He woke the dragon, and he bound it to his will. The Cetan shard, a being of godlike technological power, rose at the Emperor's command. And instead of destroying it, instead of imprisoning it again, the Emperor commanded it to teach. What followed was the greatest knowledge transfer in human history. The void dragon, compelled by the Emperor's absolute authority, began revealing technologies lost since the Dark Age, not all at once, that would overwhelm even the Mechanicus, but in carefully metered doses. Fabricator General Call, who had secretly prepared for this moment for millennia, wept openly as knowledge he had spent 10,000 years reconstructing was simply given, freely, abundantly. Mars transformed overnight from a repository of lost knowledge into a true forge of innovation. The cult Mechanicus did not die, it evolved, became something greater. The custodian's test. But the Emperor's most painful judgment was reserved for those closest to him, the Adeptus Custodes. He summoned all 10,000 to the ruins of the throne room. They came, silent and disciplined as always. They knelt in perfect formation before their master. The Emperor looked upon them and spoke words that broke some and refined others. You are my most loyal servants. You have never failed me. You have never betrayed me. For 10,000 years, you have stood vigil while I suffered. But you have also failed. You were created to protect humanity, but you allowed yourselves to become nothing more than mybodygwards. While the Imperium rotted, while my people suffered, you stood in these halls polishing your spears. You did not fail in loyalty. You failed in understanding what loyalty required. So now I give you a choice. Remain here, as glorious relics of a past age, or go forth, leave this palace, walk among my people, protect them as you were always meant to. Choose, but choose knowing that I will be disappointed in those who choose comfort over purpose. The response was immediate. Within hours, 8,000 custodians had departed the imperial palace for the first time in 10 millennia. They spread across the Imperium, not as generals or rulers, but as protectors, lone warriors standing between humanity and the darkness. The remaining 2,000 stayed to guard Terra, not because they chose comfort, but because someone had to maintain the vigil. The Emperor accepted this, but his acceptance came with expectation. They would train others, share their skills, ensure that when they finally fell, there would be warriors worthy to replace them. Guilliman's reunion. 6 hours after awakening, the Emperor finally turned his attention to his son. Guilliman had arrived on Terra the moment reports of the awakening reached him. He stood now outside the throne room, exactly as he had 10,000 years ago, waiting for permission to enter. The Emperor did not make him wait long. The doors opened, not pushed by servitors, but moved by will alone, and Guilliman entered. What transpired in that room remained private for exactly 90 minutes, but those standing guard outside reported hearing something they had never expected: laughter. The Emperor's laughter, deep and genuine, mingling with Guilliman's own relieved joy. When the doors opened again, Guilliman emerged transformed. Not physically, he was still the stern, massive Primarch he had been, but his bearing had changed. The weight he had carried, the burden of 10,000 years of struggling alone, had lifted. His public statement was brief. He is my father again, not just the emperor, not just the god thing the Imperium worships, my father, who remembers what it means to love his sons. He has asked me to continue ruling the Imperium, but now I rule with his guidance instead of in his absence. Everything changes now, everything improves now. The age of darkness is ending, the age of reason begins. Fellow servants, I must now describe what happens in the days and weeks following the Emperor's awakening, changes so vast and rapid that future historians will mark this as the greatest transformation in human history since the dark age of technology. Day 1. The Administrative Revolution. The Emperor's first act of governance was brutal in its simplicity. He purged the Adeptus Terra. Not with violence, not with executions, but with absolute, inescapable judgment. Every high lord, every administrator, every clerk and scribe in the vast bureaucracy of Terra was subject to the Emperor's scrutiny. He examined each individual personally, not physically, but psychically. In an instant, he knew everything about them, every decision they had made, every bribe they had taken or refused, every moment they had chosen personal gain over public good. Those found corrupt simply disappeared, not killed, transformed. The Emperor converted their physical forms into pure energy and absorbed them into himself. Their knowledge remained, their experiences were preserved, but the individuals who had betrayed humanity ceased to exist. 38% of the Adeptus Terra vanished in the first day. Those who remained received something more terrifying than punishment: responsibility. The Emperor appointed them to positions based not on seniority or political influence, but on competence. A junior clerk who had spent 40 years fighting against corruption might suddenly find himself appointed Lord Commander of a sector. A senior administratum official who had coasted on privilege might find himself demoted to managing supply requisitions for a single hive. Merit became the only currency that mattered, and the Emperor's ability to judge merit was absolute. Day 2-3, the military reform. With the civilian government restructured, the Emperor turned his attention to the Astra Militarum and the Space Marines. The reforms were radical. For the Guard, the Emperor abolished the long-standing prohibition on combined arms doctrine. For 10,000 years, the Imperium had deliberately kept military power fractured. The Guard controlled infantry, but not void ships. The Navy controlled ships, but not ground forces. The Mechanicus controlled Titans, but operated independently. This insanity ended. Integrated battle groups were authorized. Commanders were permitted, encouraged, to coordinate across service branches. Soldiers were given advanced training instead of being treated as expendable ammunition. Within a week, Imperial military effectiveness increased by an estimated 40%. Engagements that would have required grinding attrition warfare were won through combined arms operations. For the Astartes, the Emperor's reforms here were more controversial. He did not abolish the Codex Astartes. Guilliman's masterwork remained valid in most respects, but he made crucial changes. The 1,000-warrior chapter limit was conditionally removed. Chapters that demonstrated exceptional discipline and loyalty were permitted to expand. Chapters that showed signs of instability remained restricted. Gene seed became more freely distributed. The Emperor personally intervened in the creation process, reducing failure rates and stabilizing mutations. New chapters were founded at unprecedented rates, not to create massive legions, but to spread Astartes' protection more broadly across the Imperium. Most controversially, the Emperor created a new type of space marine, not replacing the existing Astartes, but augmenting them. These Primaris Marines, enhanced beyond even standard Astartes, were deployed to chapters as reinforcements. Many traditional Marines resented this, but the Emperor's word was absolute. Day 4-7, the Technological Awakening. But the most dramatic changes came not in governance or military, but in technology. The Emperor, his memory spanning the entirety of human history, began releasing lost knowledge. Not recklessly, he understood the dangers of advancing too quickly, but deliberately, and systematically. Standard template construct databases thought lost forever were reconstructed from his perfect recall. Medical technologies that could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia were distributed freely. Manufacturing techniques that increased efficiency hundredfold were taught to factory world overseers. Within a week, the quality of life for the average imperial citizen improved more than it had in the previous 1,000 years. Starvation decreased, infant mortality plummeted, lifespan increased. But the emperor was careful. He did not release weapons technology indiscriminately. He did not teach warp manipulation to those who might be corrupted by chaos. He metered advancement, ensuring humanity grew stronger without growing reckless. The second week, the PRMARCH returns. With the Imperium stabilized, the Emperor turned his attention to a deeply personal mission, recovering his lost sons. Day 8, Lemon Russ found. The Emperor's consciousness swept into the Eye of Terror itself, the heart of Chaos's domain in real space. Demons screamed and fled before his presence. The Chaos gods themselves turned their full attention to this invasion, hurling everything they had at him. They failed. In the deepest pit of the Eye, the Emperor found Lemon Russ, the Wolf King, trapped in endless battle against Chaos horrors. For 10,000 years, Russ had been fighting, unable to win, unable to die, unable to escape. The Emperor shattered his prison with a thought. Lem Russ emerged, feral and nearly mad from millennia of unceasing warfare. But when he saw his father standing before him, blazing with light in the heart of darkness, sanity returned. "Father," Russ whispered, "I knew you would come. I told them you would come." The Emperor brought him home. It took 3 days of intensive psychic healing to restore Russ's mind fully. But when the Wolf King emerged from the Emperor's care, he was himself again, scarred, changed, but unbroken. Day 11, Jaghatai Khan recovered. The Khan was found not in real space, but within the webway itself, the ancient Eldari network of tunnels through the warp. He had been racing through those passages for 10 millennia, unable to stop, driven by some curse or compulsion to endless motion. The Emperor stepped into the webway and simply stopped time. In that frozen instant, he broke the curse binding his son. Jaghatai Khan stumbled, no longer able to run, and fell to his knees before his father. "I have been running from my failures," the Khan admitted. "From Chogoris, from my legion, from my duty, I did not know how to stop." "Then I will teach you," the Emperor replied. "There is no shame in fleeing when the enemy is too strong, but you are strong enough now. It is time to stand." Day 13, Vulcan's truth revealed. Vulcan had never truly been lost. The Emperor revealed to the shocked Imperium that the Primarch of the Salamanders had been alive and active throughout the 10 millennia, walking among humanity in disguise, testing them, protecting them in secret. The Emperor summoned him. Vulcan appeared, still bearing the humble appearance he had worn while walking among mortals. But when he knelt before his father, his true form was revealed, a giant aflame with perpetual fire, unkillable and undying. "You did well, my son," the Emperor said. "You understood what your brothers did not, that to serve humanity, you must know humanity. You walked among them when others ruled over them. For this, I am proud." Day 14, Korax returned from Shadow. Korax had descended into the warp itself, hunting the word-bearers who had betrayed the Imperium. For 10,000 years, he had stalked them through the immaterium, becoming something more shadow than flesh, more concept than physical being. The Emperor reached into the warp and pulled his son back into reality, but Korax had changed too profoundly to fully return. He existed now between states, sometimes solid, sometimes shadow, sometimes something else entirely. "I cannot be what I was," Korax said, his voice echoing as if from a great distance. "The warp has marked me too deeply." "Then be what you have become," the Emperor replied. "You are my shadow son now. Where I cannot go, you will walk. Where light cannot reach, you will hunt. This is not corruption, this is evolution." Day 15, the Traitor Primarch's Choice. But the Emperor's greatest mercy was reserved for the fallen. He sent a message into the warp, carried by his absolute will, reaching even into the domains of the Chaos Gods. The message was simple. To my sons who fell to chaos, I offer you one chance. Only one. Renounce your dark masters and return to me. I will cleanse you, I will restore you, but you must choose freely, truly, completely. This offer expires in 7 days. Choose wisely. The response was mixed. Magnus the Red, the Crimson King, tried to accept. He reached out toward his father's light, desperate to be free of Tzeentch's grip. But 10,000 years of corruption had woven themselves too deeply into his being. When the Emperor attempted to purge the taint, Magnus's physical form began to dissolve. The Emperor made a terrible choice. He saved what he could. Magnus's soul was extracted and preserved, but his body was destroyed entirely. What remains of Magnus now exists in a crystalline matrix in the Emperor's laboratory, conscious but bodiless, contributing knowledge but unable to act. It is mercy, it is also torment. Mortarion refused outright. Nurgle's grip on the Death Lord was absolute. The Emperor did not press the issue. Free will meant accepting even the choice to remain damned. But Fulgrim shocked the galaxy by accepting. The demon prince that had worn Fulgrim's skin for 10 millennia was ripped apart by the Emperor's will. And from the fragments, impossibly, the original Fulgrim's soul was recovered, a tiny spark of the Primarch that had survived, trapped and screaming, for all those centuries. The Emperor could not fully restore him. The body was gone, the original gene seed corrupted beyond recovery. But he gave Fulgrim something else, a new form, crafted from pure will and psychic energy, housing the rescued soul. When Fulgrim emerged from the Emperor's sanctum, he was changed, ethereal, translucent, beautiful in ways that mortal beauty could not match. But he was himself, and he wept. I have been in hell, Fulgrim said. I felt every atrocity committed in my name, unable to stop it, unable to die. Father, thank you. Death would have been kinder, but you gave me life instead. I will spend eternity trying to deserve this gift. The first month, the chaos response. The ruinous powers did not accept these developments quietly. The Chaos Gods, recognizing that the Emperor now posed an existential threat, unified in ways they had not since the Horus Heresy. The Great Rift surged with unprecedented violence. Demon armies poured into real space in numbers that made previous invasions look trivial. But the Emperor was ready. He had spent 10,000 years fighting chaos in the warp, while simultaneously maintaining the Astronomicon. Now, fully awakened and no longer bound to the Golden Throne, he could wage war on both fronts simultaneously. In the warp, his consciousness became a fortress, a bastion of order in infinite chaos. Where he manifested, the warp itself recoiled. Demons could not exist in his presence. Chaos corruption burned away like mist before the sun. In real space, he empowered his servants with capabilities they had never possessed. Space Marines fighting demon incursions found themselves surrounded by golden light that made them immune to warp corruption. Guardsmen facing overwhelming hordes discovered that their faith, not in the Emperor as God, but in humanity's potential, could repel demons as effectively as any weapon. The war was brutal, entire sectors burned, billions died, but for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity was winning. The 6th week, the WEBWAY triumphant. 6 weeks after awakening, the Emperor completed his greatest achievement, the Imperial Webway. Not merely repairing what Magnus had destroyed during the heresy, but expanding it, creating a network of safe passages through reality that connected every major world in the Imperium. The implications were staggering. Instant communication. Messages that once took months to deliver via astropath could now arrive in hours through webway relays. Safe travel, no more warp exposure, no more ships lost to warp storms, no more Jellifield failures leading to demonic possession. Strategic mobility. Armies could deploy across the galaxy in days. Reinforcements could arrive instantly. The Imperium's military reach increased 1,000-fold. Economic revolution, trade routes that were too dangerous became routine. Goods moved freely, wealth spread, poverty decreased. Within 2 months of the webway's activation, the Imperium's GDP increased by an estimated 300%. But the Emperor was careful. Each webway gate was guarded not just by armies, but by reality anchors, devices that prevented chaos corruption from using the network to spread. The mistakes of the past would not be repeated. The third month, the galaxy transformed. 3 months after the Emperor's awakening, the galaxy was fundamentally different. Politically, the theocratic tyranny had been dismantled. The imperial cult still existed, but as an educational institution rather than a church. Governance was based on merit rather than corruption. The Inquisition had been reformed into a true investigative body rather than a sanctioning force. Militarily, combined arms doctrine made imperial forces unprecedentedly effective. The Astartes, reinforced with Primaris Marines and guided by returned Primarchs, crushed enemies that would have required years to defeat. The return of Russ, Khan, Vulcan, Corax, and the redeemed Fulgrim meant that half the loyalist Primarchs now actively led humanity's armies. Technologically, life expectancy on average imperial worlds increased from 43 years to 67 years in 3 months. Infant mortality dropped by 73%. Starvation decreased by 84%. The quality of life improvements were so dramatic that skeptics initially refused to believe the statistics. Spiritually, this was perhaps the most profound change. Humanity, freed from the obligation to worship, began to understand what the Emperor had always intended, that they were capable of greatness not because a god commanded it, but because it was their nature. Faith did not die, but it transformed. Citizens prayed not to a god, but to the ideal of what humanity could become. They had faith not in divine intervention, but in human potential. And paradoxically, this made them stronger against chaos than 10,000 years of religious fervor ever had, because chaos thrives on desperation and dependence, but humanity that believes in itself, that sees the Emperor not as a crutch, but as an example of what mortals can achieve. Such humanity is nearly immune to corruption. The Emperor's final ACT. But the Emperor knew his work in the Imperium was temporary. His true war was in the warp, against forces that mortals could not comprehend. 3 months after awakening, he gathered his sons, all of them, loyalist and redeemed traitor alike, and explained what must come next. "My children," he said, "I have given you 3 months of my full attention. In that time, we have achieved what I hoped would take decades. The Imperium is stable. Humanity is advancing. You have the tools you need. But I cannot remain here permanently. My presence in real space weakens the barriers between dimensions. Every moment I manifest physically, I risk tearing new rifts between reality and the warp. So I must do what I always intended. I must ascend fully into the Imperium and wage war against the Chaos Gods in their own domain. I must become a warp entity permanently, fighting them on equal terms where they cannot hide behind their demon servants. But I will not leave you helpless." He raised his hands, and power flowed from him into his sons. Not just the Primarchs, but every human in the Sol system felt it, a fragment of his will, a spark of his determination, an echo of his absolute certainty that humanity could and would prevail. "I give you my strength," the Emperor said, "not to make you dependent, but to make you capable. Use it wisely. Build the Imperium I always envisioned, not perfect, for perfection is impossible, but always striving, always improving, always advancing. Guilliman, you rule in my stead. The other Primarchs serve as your advisors and generals. Together, you are more than sufficient to lead humanity through whatever trials come. I will watch, I will guide when I can, and when humanity faces threats beyond mortal capability, I will intervene. But the daily governance, the slow work of building civilization, that is yours now. Make me proud." Then, as his sons watched, the Emperor's physical form dissolved into light. But unlike before, when he had merely become translucent, this time he ascended completely. His consciousness expanded outward, growing vast beyond measure, until it encompassed not just Terra, but the entire Sol system, then the segmentum solar, then impossibly, the entire galaxy. Every human being felt it simultaneously, the Emperor's presence, vast and protective, wrapping around humanity like a shield, not controlling them, not demanding worship, simply present, watchful, ready to protect if needed, but trusting them to handle their own affairs. In the warp, astropaths and navigators reported unprecedented changes. The Astronomicon was no longer a beacon, it was a fortress. The Emperor's consciousness, fully ascended into the Imperium, now stood as an impassable wall between humanity and chaos's worst predations. Demon incursions didn't stop entirely. Chaos cults still formed, corruption still existed, but the overwhelming, civilization-ending threats that had plagued the Imperium for 10 millennia, those could not penetrate the Emperor's shield. Humanity, for the first time in 10,000 years, had breathing room, time to build, time to advance, time to become what the Emperor had always believed they could be. Thus I conclude my account of the greatest transformation in human history, the day the God Emperor awakened and the galaxy changed forever. Fellow servants of the throne, I have shared with you what occurred across those first 3 months, but I must also tell you what happened afterward in the years that followed, because the true measure of the Emperor's awakening is not in the immediate changes, but in the civilization that emerged from them. Year 1 after awakening, humanity's borders expanded for the first time in millennia, not through conquest, but through reclamation. Worlds lost to warp storms were reconnected. Civilizations isolated for centuries rejoined the Imperium, and they came willingly because the Imperium they rejoined was not the oppressive theocracy they remembered, but something new, something worth belonging to. Year 5, the first new SDC was designed, not recovered, but created. Human ingenuity, freed from the shackles of technological stagnation, began innovating again. The Mechanicus, guided by the Void Dragon's teaching and the Emperor's wisdom, made advances that would have been heretical only years before. Year 10, the Great Rift began to close. Not completely, such healing would take centuries, but measurably. The Emperor's presence in the warp, fighting chaos at its source, was winning. Slowly, incrementally, but winning. Year 20, a child born on a factory world could expect to live 78 years, receive education, choose their profession, and retire in comfort. This child's grandparents had lived in a hab block where the average lifespan was 37 years. Illiteracy was 90%, and choosing your profession meant choosing which form of barely compensated labor would kill you fastest. This is the Emperor's true legacy, not the wars he won or the enemies he destroyed, but the civilization he enabled humanity to build. I am old now. I have kept this chronicle for 23 years since the awakening. I do not know how many more years I have, but I know this. I have lived to see humanity's darkest hour transform into its brightest dawn. I have witnessed miracles that 10,000 years of prayer could not accomplish, achieved in mere decades by human hands guided by superhuman wisdom. The Emperor is not gone. He is simply fighting on a front we cannot see, but we feel his presence. We know he watches, and that knowledge, not that we have a God to worship, but that we have a protector who believes in our potential, that knowledge makes us stronger than any amount of faith ever could. To whoever finds this chronicle in ages to come, know that you live in a galaxy transformed. The age of darkness has ended. The age of advancement has begun, not because a God commanded it, but because humanity, freed from ignorance and guided by wisdom, chose to build rather than merely survive. This is the Emperor's gift, not salvation handed to us, but the tools and knowledge to save ourselves. Use them well. Ave Imperator, Gloria in excelsis terra. The God Emperor awakened, and in awakening, he showed us we were never meant to be sheep following a shepherd. We were meant to be phoenixes, rising from our own ashes. Historiator Terminus Gaius Severan, Vault of Ultimate Contingencies. Record sealed, 23M42, 23 years post-awakening. The Emperor protects, but more importantly, the Emperor believes in us. Let us prove him right.